Hello, I hope you're all doing well. In this video I want to show you some huge changes coming to Alchemy on the global lab. So here I'll be viewing the global lab patch notes from October 20th, 2023. And usually most of the changes that make it to global lab also make it to the game 2 weeks after that. So we can expect these changes in 2 patches from now. But there is a chance that they either change things around here or cut some things completely, so always take this with a grain of salt, and what matters is what actually makes it to the live servers. Now, the global lab patch notes are in Korean, and there is always a nice translation over here on BDO Foundry, which I'll be reading from. Okay, so what are the changes exactly? Well, always as in these patch notes, there is a dev comment where the developers kind of go over their reasoning for making these changes. This is a long text, but in short, basically the developers admit that Alchemy has a huge material supply problem, and I fully agree with that. It's one of the major things that make Alchemy weaker compared to, for example, cooking. And they're addressing this by doing 2 things. So first of all, they're gonna increase the ways in which you can get Alchemy materials like saps, traces, fruits, powders, and so on. And second, they're gonna increase the price of materials on the market, so there's more of an incentive to sell them, and since that would mean that the elixirs are less profitable to craft, they're increasing the prices of elixirs to match the material price increases. So what they did is go ahead and pretty much double the price of all of the elixirs. Now, these elixir changes were already on the global labs last week, but here they seemingly did a revision, and this is now the updated list of price changes. And the rest of the alchemy section in this patch notes basically deal with increasing the supply of alchemy materials, which they do by either buffing existing methods as well as adding new ways to get these materials. Starting off with the traces, they went ahead and just straight up doubled the yield you get from trace nodes. And given that these nodes are the main supplier of traces in the game, this is a pretty huge change to the amount of traces the player base can generate. Now the devs note that there's a ton of people actually sitting on alchemy items like the traces and not selling them, but with the recent increases on the trace prices as well as this output buff, I hope that more people are gonna pick up these trace nodes and then sell the traces on the market. The second change is buffing a quest. So Alchemy has a bonus quest that randomly pops up when doing alchemy. The task is to craft 40 of a blood, and you will be rewarded with previously 300 and now 500 traces. And even before the change, this quest was amazing for getting traces, and now that it's buffed to 500 per quest, this is easily one of the most efficient way to get traces for the time invested. It takes like 2 minutes to complete the quest. And third, this is a change that the community has been requesting for the longest time. They're adding traces to gathering. So specifically what they're doing is they're taking all of the random trade items you get from gathering, for example the female Kermes and the polished paw, and they're replacing them with traces. Each gathering type will yield 1 type of trace. For example, you get a trace of earth by mining, trace of forest by hoe collecting, and so on. If the drop rate on these traces is good, this could actually be a significant buff to gathering income. So bottom line, they did 3 things for traces. They doubled the node yield, increased the amount you can get from the quest, and added a way to get traces through gathering. And I think this is a huge change because traces are one of the main ingredients in alchemy and they're quite difficult to come by at the moment. Now moving on to saps, so here, similar to traces, they just went ahead and increased the node output. They doubled the output on pretty much all sap nodes, exceptions being the maple and pine sap, which for some reason get a slightly lower buff, and the snowfield cedar sap, they increased the output by 5 times. Now at first this might seem like a lot, but keep in mind that the snowfield cedar sap yield was extremely low before, so this is more to bring it in line with the output of other sap nodes. In addition, they also buffed the amount of saps you can get from gathering. The base yield right now is 2 to 4 and they're buffing it to 3 to 5, so this is pretty much a 30% buff to the amount of sap you can get from gathering. And a funny thing, they actually added Afwaru for gathering, so if you're gathering sap, then this guy might pop out, and if you chase him and scold him, then you will get a bunch of sap. And I think this is actually really interesting because PA has been known to kind of try out systems like this. Here they're adding Aurora to sapping, and if this is well received in the community, they might add it to other gathering types as well. Moving on to fruits, there's gonna be changes to gathering as well as farming. And starting with farming, they are gonna do another buff on mysterious seeds. Right now you can get 30 to 40 fruits out of one mysterious seed, and they're buffing it by another 50%, and it's gonna be 45 to 60 fruits per mysterious seed. Now in addition, they're also slightly buffing the number of fruits you can get just by regular breeding crops. So they're clearly showing here that they want farming to be one of the major ways to obtain fruits. And to be honest, I would have even liked to see some stronger buffs here, because as of right now, farming is not the strongest life skill. Now in addition, they're also buffing the amount of fruits you can get from gathering, and that's a straight up 70% buff. You get fruits from whole gathering, and I really think this is the buff that could make whole gathering, which is one of the weaker gathering types, be more in line with some of the stronger gathering types. So overall, some decent buffs to getting fruits. Now right now, fruits are probably one of the hardest bottlenecks in Alchemy, and as far as I can tell, they don't have a price increase for them planned, so we'll have to see if these changes are actually enough to let these fruits sit on the market. And then the change you've all been waiting for, truffles. Truffle mushrooms are the bottleneck in crafting the elixir of detection, one of the strongest elixirs in the elixir rotation and one of the most in-demand elixirs right now. And supply on these is extremely limited because the only way to get truffle mushrooms is by scavenging caves throughout the world. And since the truffle mushroom spawns are shared between players, it means truffles are extremely contested unless you're like gathering at 3 AM in the morning. And the devs recognized that truffles are too difficult to get and added another way to get them, farming. Now they also clearly said that they still want truffle mushrooms to be a rare resource, so they didn't make truffles something you can cultivate on your farm straight out. Instead, what they did is adding the truffle hypha, so basically the truffle seed, as a drop to Alchemy. So when doing Alchemy, you will get the truffle hypha as a random drop, and you can then turn this into a plantable seed and harvest to get truffles. Now what you cannot do is breed these hyphas, so they're pretty much a one-time loot bag of truffles. And additionally, they added the white truffles. You can get them as a rare drop when harvesting this truffle hypha. And it says here they increased the crafting yield, which could be really interesting. Now, having seen these truffle changes, I will say I completely agree that there need to be more ways to obtain truffle mushrooms. I also agree with keeping them as a rare resource, so it's pretty much gonna come down to how they implement this. So what are gonna be the drop rate from Alchemy and what will be the harvest rates on these? Is this gonna be more of a gimmick or more of an actual alternative to getting truffle rather than scavenging caves throughout the world? Alright, then we have some smaller changes left, and then finally I want to give you my thoughts on this update and what this actually means for Alchemy. So first of all, they added some items you can exchange the Alchemy byproduct for. You can now get powders as well. I guess this is a pretty nice change. And then there are two more changes to some really rare items. So first of all, they added another way to obtain coral crystal. Right now you can only get them from underwater gathering, which is quite tedious. So what they did is add them to sea monster hunting. And second, they extended the ways to get Griffin's Claw. They made it so you can get Griffin's Claw from the scroll bosses. And another thing, they added a proper gathering rotation for the Snowfield Cedar Sap. Hopefully this is actually enough to turn into a full rotation and gather without having to channel swap. Alright, having seen all of these changes, what does that actually mean for Alchemy? I think PA did a great job at addressing the supply problems in Alchemy for materials like saps, traces, fruits, and even some of the rarer materials like truffles. Now I do hope this will make Alchemy more accessible to a broader range of players, since you don't have to spend as much time chasing behind materials. Will it actually make Alchemy more profitable? To be determined. Now, one thing I would love to see them address is the state of Alchemy Imperials. While the price updates on elixirs are great for market Alchemy, they're the final nail in the coffin for Imperial Alchemy. And the devs seem to be aware of it. They stated in the patch notes that they have plans to address Imperial Alchemy once these changes have settled. In any case, I hope you found this video helpful, and I'll see you in a future video. Take care!